One of the things that causes reading comprehension problems for students is that teachers aren't very good about paying attention to the readability of the text that they give students. First, because to be honest, teachers often don't read in a very thorough way the things that they give to students as assignments. And even when they do, we're not always very good at recognizing what makes a document difficult for students when it isn't difficult for us. So here's a section from an American history textbook on colonial slavery. One thing I can do to check on its readability is actually just to cut and paste it and put it into a uh, readability checker like this one. You can get these free online, and to be honest, they actually are built-in features of both Microsoft Word and Google Docs, so you can do it from there as well. And you can see that it gives you a lot of different indices that reports the readability in terms of grade level. This one has a range from ninth grade to 12th grade and seems to hover around 10th grade, which isn't too bad given that this is a textbook aimed at students who are American history students, would probably mean something like 11th grade. Um, and they determine it based on a variety of factors, which are mostly either how many syllables there are per sentence or how many words there are per sentence, or both, which is obviously about the complexity of the writing and the complexity of the vocabulary. But I want to suggest that there's actually some more important things that we could be looking at to see what makes a reading difficult for students. So instead, if we look at this rubric, which was created to look at text complexity for informational text, you'll see that there are other features that we can look at besides vocabulary and things like that. This one has four specific elements that can be important in terms of thinking about what makes a document challenging. So purpose. In this case, it's a textbook. It doesn't say this is a textbook to learn about the colonial slavery, but that the purpose is easily implied by the reader. So we're going to call this middle low, right? It's implied, but it's easy to identify based on context. In terms of the structure, it's a little more complicated. Africans had been brought to Jamestown as early as 1619 sounds like it's going to be a sequential document telling a story, but in fact, it's a cause and effect document, which can be misleading for students. It sort of jumps all over the place in time, in fact. So it's I'm going to say that it's actually middle high. It's complex. There are some explicit connections, but there's actually a lot of missing information. In terms of language, this is when it really gets difficult. I mean, first, there is difficult vocabulary when we think about multitudes, lucrative, mutinous. Those could be words that are complicated for students. It also has structural problems. There's a lot of passive voice. Africans had been brought to Jamestown. Drastic change came in the 1680s. That means that there's no actors who are identified, which can make it difficult for students to understand what's happening and how it happened. Moreover, there's some figurative or abstract language, hard-pinched white colonists gambling with their lives. These make things very difficult. So I'd actually say that it's somewhere between high and middle high. And then finally, in terms of knowledge demands, there's a fair amount of missing information. Why were they hacking out crude clearings? Why were they likely to die? Why did they lose their charter? All of those things are missing, and someone like you or I might put that information in there while we're reading it, but for students who lack that background knowledge, it can be much more difficult to fill in the blanks and therefore to comprehend the overall text. So I would call that middle high. Now, it's not actually that important what level it's specifically at. This is really more about thinking about what makes reading challenging for students. So in the Canvas module, you'll find a document on 17th century England, which actually comes from the materials that the Department of Ed put together for Learn at Home during this period. So what I'd like you to do is to use the informational text rubric and evaluate that document in the same way that I have here.